All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
This week in Missouri politics was highlighted by a lot of action in the state Senate, capped off by a very long night Tuesday night. And here to tell us all about it is the Senate Minority Leader, Senator Joe Keaveny. Senator, welcome.
Thank you.
First of all, what happened Tuesday night? I understand you had a late night.
We went all night. We went in at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and adjourned 4 o'clock Wednesday morning.
Once you get to 4, why don't you just go to daybreak, right?
We were pretty close to being there, yeah.
So what happened?
It was a long debate. Essentially, House Bill 9 and 10 and 11 kept us up for hours. There's a filibuster on House Bill 11 about extending the managed care throughout the whole state for the Medicaid recipients. Mm-hmm. And some senators were very, very opinioned about whether we needed to do that or not. So they filibustered for about 5 hours on that.
On that, it seemed as though the way that Senator Schaefer did it, he line item much of the bill and then lump sum some other parts of it to let the state decide how to spend it or to cut.
Right.
What was the reaction in your caucus on that? And what was the reaction in the body?
Actually, the reaction for most of the body was that we didn't do our responsibility to balance the budget. We shunned it and we gave it to the bureaucrats, and we just lump summed it, took a 4% cut, and told the bureaucrats, divide it up as you want.
That's not been done since, I guess, 93?
I'm not aware of it ever being done. So yep. I will take your word that it was done in 1993. It hasn't been done in the 6 years that I've been in the Senate.
What it was, I mean, there is a group that's lauding Senator Schaefer for actually cutting government, though. He actually did make a cut in some of those programs.
Well, he made a cut from the requested amount. Actually, every one of those programs is getting more money than they got last year.
But at a slower growth rate, correct?
But at a slower growth rate, yeah.
What else is happening? I guess this next week you're looking at a huge week where you finish the budget, however that turns out, and you turn to education. Yeah,
the budget bills will go to conference committee. So between when the Senate and the House get together, I think the bills that come out of those conferences will be very different than what went in.
Do you believe at the end of the day the lump sum budgeting actually makes it into the final budget?
Probably not. I don't. Which is another problem I have. We are, again, abdicating our responsibility to the conference committees.
So turning the page next week, before you get to that, you'll do the education transfers bill.
The beginning of the week, that's on the calendar for first up.
You have a starting point. The governor came to the table after session when he vetoed it and said why. Do you believe you'll be able to work out a deal in the Senate?
I think we will work out a deal. We pretty much have the rough drafts ready to go. The problem with the current transfer bill is the fiscal note. It's about $18 million. That's starting to take someone's breath away. We'll whittle that down, and I think at the end we'll get something done.
Will there be something the governor can sign?
I believe so. The governor's main objection last year was the vouchers for the non-parochial private schools. That's not in the bill. We are expanding charter schools. So I think it's something the governor can live with.
The governor said in his State of the State address he would be more active. He would find the third floor, he'd realize it existed, and he would work with people to try to make bills like the education bill work before he has to come in and veto them. People say if they can't work with you, they can't work with anybody. Has he been to your office?
No, the governor has not been to my office. He does.
You think he kept his promise?
I'm a big boy. I kind of know what path I want to go. I don't need direct oversight, but I've heard somewhat from the governor's office, not from him personally. Do I think he kept his promise? You know, I wasn't expecting him to be in my office weekly anyway, so we're working along just fine.
Understand. So when this bill gets done, what are the main things this does? And there's always talk every week about Ferguson and Ferguson-related issues and what is and what isn't. What does this bill do, and what are the long-term effects this can have on North County and the rest of the state?
The bill doesn't go as far as I would like it to go. I would like the bill to cap the tuition that the unaccredited schools have to pay for the transfer students. The bill doesn't do that. The bill incentivizes the accredited districts to take the kids, and if they do that, and it would allow them to not include those test scores for a number of years. I'm kind of cool to that, to be honest with you. I don't want to stop the bill over it because I think we need to address the situation. But, you know, to put the failing school district in a position where it's doomed to fail and doomed to go bankrupt, I think is a mistake.
If it went bankrupt, then can you step in and remake it? Is there a way to remake that existing framework to be successful?
Well, you know, I think that's not going to be the case. I think if it goes bankrupt, they'll end up dissolving that school district, and those kids will go to very viable school districts. We have to be careful where we send those kids, and DESE's very, very much aware of this. We don't, any school district that is on the verge of failing, we don't want to put a lot of underperforming children into there. So they want to send them to very viable school districts, which with the socioeconomic conditions in the failing districts are probably pretty far away. Those kids are going to spend some time on buses.
How many weeks go by without you being worried about St. Louis City going unaccredited?
There's not one. You know, that's the elephant in the room. Not only the 25,000 kids that are in the school district now, but the other 25,000 that have opted to go to private schools that will be eligible to go to public schools in the county.
This week in the news, there was an election in Springfield, and the Non-Discrimination Act had made a little progress. Can you tell folks what that is and what your thoughts were on the Springfield election?
Well, the Non-Discrimination Act, we passed it out of my committee on Wednesday, and it sets up a class of another protected class where the LGBT community cannot be discharged for being gay, cannot be denied housing, cannot be kept out of public places.
Some of our viewers from outstate Missouri may wonder, is that a problem that happens frequently?
You know, I can't say it does. I'm not aware that it happens frequently, but just the thought of being able to fire somebody, to deny them of a right to make a living, I don't know why we want to discriminate against anybody. So I don't see the harm in including that as a protected class.
Where does that bill go? Where is it at now? What are the chances that actually becomes law?
It's going to be an uphill fight. I'm not optimistic about it. I'm not sure we'll get floor time in the Senate. But now that it's out of committee, I'm comfortable if another bill comes along and it fits, I think it's ripe for an amendment. Before
you go, we wanted to ask you on the show for a while now about your death penalty legislation. You introduced it early in the session. You attacked it from some creative angles about fiscal responsibility and a number of other things. Can you tell our viewers about your bill and about your position?
Well, my position, I'm opposed to death penalty. Let's clear that up right now. I don't think we ought to be executing I don't think it's the state's responsibility to execute.
And isn't it a bizarre thing that now we finally say, okay, municipal courts are completely awry, but the rest of them are great?
Right.
I mean, it seems like you have a very large leap in logic to figure that the problems stop at state court.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, this is a mistake that can't be corrected. So, you know, why are we doing it? I take my hat off to Governor Ryan for all of his shortfalls. He stepped up and said, you know, we're not doing this right. We're going to stop it today. All my bill, it starts the conversation and says, okay, how much are we spending to institute the death penalty? Some of these guys are on death row for 20 and 25 years. Why not just lock them away forever? I think the victims' families will be just as well served. They don't have to keep going back to court, and let's just lock them away. I'm not defending these guys for the heinous crimes that they commit. I'm just saying, you know, They may well deserve death for what they've done, but who are we to do it?
Last thing, Senator Dempsey told the Missouri Times this week he's going to put right to work on the calendar end of 2 weeks from now. What will that be the point where the minority says no more? Will that be the end of if that's brought to the floor and a PQ is attempted, is that the end of session? I
think if there's a PQ come out, that will be the end of session no matter what the issue is. It will be a long 5 weeks. That's what we have left in the session, and I think that's 2 weeks away. So the final 3 weeks will be very contentious.
That's it. Senator, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with our Opinion Maker panel.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
And we've already started having fun with our Opinion Maker panel this week that I think is going to be lively, starting with Sean Nicholson, the man every Republican state legislator knows and would like to find in an alley somewhere. Strategist and namesake of the Barklage Cup that's sweeping Twitter and trending in St. Louis, David Barklage. Jane Dueker, Stinson lobbyist, lawyer,
of the Barklage
guru
Cup.
of the Stinger campaign, champion of the Barklage Cup, wife, mother, and now KMOX personality, right?
Yes.
You cutting grass on the side too, or is there any?
Absolutely.
Lawn care as well.
Lawn care as well.
And we're very happy to be joined the first time by Dave Spence, a businessman, philanthropist, former Republican nominee for governor, and person that's very generous this week to help children with epilepsy by sponsoring the Barklage Cup. So very pleased to have you here, sir.
Appreciate it.
And we will get started with you. You heard the senator's interview. What did you make of it?
Well, I think everybody sees and hears what they want to hear. I think the school transfer bill is obviously very important. There's people that would disagree with that, but we've been involved with the city schools. We've been involved with Ferguson, Florissant, Normandy. We're seeing poor results. I think some of the issues in Ferguson and in our community are the results of poor education. And I think we've got to rewrite the rules. And competition is a good thing, I think, when it comes to education. And I think the school transfer bill will help foster that competition.
Jane, one thing I heard the senator say was, we asked him, the governor came out and said, I'll be in your office. I will come to the third floor. If you can't work with Joe Keaveny, it's probably you.
Well, I think, I think he did indicate that he wanted to be more involved and was going to be more present. I'm not sure that anyone has seen that yet, maybe toward the end of session, because that's when everything really starts hopping and everything gets negotiated, that we will see more of him. I'm not sure that there's been anything so contentious that they haven't been able to work it out. I mean, they got the transfer bill done. So I guess if there are issues that still need to be worked out, I think it'll be interesting to see how the governor handles the block budgeting, because I think that's a unique situation, and I would think that would be a situation that the governor would be intensely interested in. So I guess we'll see if that brings him to the third floor.
I don't think Jane has a sense of humor in the morning to be able to say.
I thought she had a sense of humor right then when she said he'll come around now.
To have a straight face when you have Governor No-Show in the Show Me State and to explain that he's not needed right now. I think that's a very brave statement.
There's been a session that's going on for a few months, Jane.
I agree.
Just to floor up.
I agree, but
Sean Nicholson, you talked to many Democratic legislators. Was that representative of what's been of that promise to do more with the legislature?
Sometimes it depends on who you talk to, but I think at the end of the day, what matters the most is the policy that goes home and how that impacts families and their kitchen tables. And there's not a whole lot of interest in the palace intrigue and who's not talking to whom. People want to see results, and they want to see what happens to their kitchen tables and what happens to their schools.
Point that palace intrigue matters when the governor shows up in June, starts vetoing bills, and he wasn't anywhere in April, telling them that I can't live with that, I can do this. I mean, isn't that where the palace intrigue? Maybe they don't care, but that's how it actually affects people, right? I mean.
I think it matters most to people like us who are trying to figure out, when bills are going to pass, and we're killing time and just wondering about whose feelings are hurt. I think what matters most is the policies that get passed and what makes it to the finish line.
I think Sean's right that you can get caught too much in the nuance of things, but I do think there's substantive issues, a lot of frustration on both Republicans and Democrats about the governor's no-show and lack of leadership. I mean, and candidly, not to make a partisan statement, but this is the Republican budget. So whether you don't like it or whether you like it, candidly, this is a Republican budget. The Republicans cut taxes last year. They've not raised taxes, yet they end up with the largest surplus in a decade of $75 million. More funding, historic funding for K through 12. And candidly, these are all things, well, Governor Nixon's budget was 40% increase in welfare. In fact, I believe that Governor Nixon has increased welfare more than any other governor in the history of the state of Missouri. So you have two divergent paths, and the fact that Nixon is not out there advocating for his either seems a lack of real commitment to it, or the fact that his leadership skills are of non-engagement, and the legislature's taken the lead to accomplish these things.
The fact that it is a Republican budget, is it fair to say that Senator Schaefer's budget, he's the budget chairman, he did cut government maybe more than any other budget chair has, maybe since the Republicans took the majority with the way he handled it?
Well, absolutely. I think this is the Schaefer Deal budget. John Deal has taken a huge lead in the House. His budget chairman is very, solid. Everything else. Rick String was there for several years and had left. But, those two have sort of pulled together and done something, I think, phenomenal. Again, after the tax cuts, they still have a surplus. And I think they got the priorities right. And remember, this would be the earliest budget ever passed in the history of the state. And part of that is because of the constitutional amendment that was passed overwhelmingly by the people in reaction to Governor Nixon's abuses. When I say abuses, we're talking about his withholds and his vetoes. He vetoed, for example, defibrillators for the Highway Patrol after 2 children died that could have been saved by that equipment. At the same time, he spent $550,000 on flying airplanes. We can't fund transportation without a tax hike. Yet on the other hand, we fund the Highway Transportation Department divert funds. We fund $100,000 plus for travel out of state for the Lottery Commission. So I think the problem is the budget process that the legislature is pushing forward is very solid, very goal-oriented, and very successful. I think the administration under Governor Nixon is mismanaged, and to the extent that we've lost our auditor, Tom Schweik, who held accountability, and now he's put a hack in the place. And I like John Watson. He is a delightful, good person.
Replacement.
But
Do you not think
nevertheless,
it's fair that sometimes Jay Nixon has had to deal with some once-in-a-generation things? I mean, John Watson's a competent guy to do the job till a permanent person gets there.
well, I don't know. I agree he's had to deal with once-in-a-generation things, but I don't think we want to really judge his performance on Ferguson, his performance on so many areas of government. I don't think that his lack of leadership there, his lack of leadership on the budget, his lack of engagement on so many issues is something that's historic.
Sean, what about this lump sum budgeting? How does that come out? He did cut the programs to let the state bureaucrats figure out how to make the cuts. What's the effect of that?
Well, I think the immediate effect is a lot of GOP opposition to what Senator Schaefer has tried to do. We saw in the budget debate this week that Senator Rob Schaaf, of all people, was really concerned with the way that Schaefer wanted to pass the buck to the governor that he complained so much about and say, hey, Jay, you figure out how to make these dramatic cuts, and then we'll complain about whatever you decide.
But Sean, that's the exact opposite of what you just said. That's palace intrigue, and what do we get as results? I think even you would embrace this budget for a lot of the goals it achieved.
Except that it's being balanced on the back of the most vulnerable in Missouri. And I don't know how the GOP can be proud of cutting disabled people, cutting mental health benefits, cutting things that from people who have the least ability
There were
to pay them.
$75 million in cuts in a $28 billion budget. The idea after the increases we've done.
But Dave, you've actually traveled the state.
Jay Nixon.
It seems like some of these priorities they've made are the priorities of if you ask people, that's what they say their priorities are.
Well, I think that, first of all, I'm coming in as a non-candidate and kind of taking a step back after learning a lot. You guys are in the weeds. I think the average citizen looks back and says, you guys are crazy. We are all Missourians. We need to get along. We have 5.9 million Missourians that we need to protect. It's not about one class versus the other. We have a lot of different cultures in this state. And there's a lot of finger pointing and a lot of name calling. We need to come together as Missourians because we are not showing our best self. And this budget battle and the he said, she said, it's not healthy for our state. We need to do the best job. There's 49 other states that have great ideas. Some are good, some are bad. Let's take the best of all those. Let's get together as Missouri and show what we can really do. I just think this, again, this is about Missouri politics. I understand that. But the average citizen, this is what turns people off.
Sure. Speaking of being one Missouri, Sean, give us a rundown of what the election was in Springfield and the Non-Discrimination Act.
Sure. So Senator Keaveny talked about a statewide non-discrimination act that would provide protections for LGBT Missourians. Right now, a Missourian can be fired or lose their apartment if they're gay. That's wrong. It's discriminatory. But there is bipartisan support for a law. There are a number of GOP sponsors in the House. There was Republican support in the Senate a couple years ago when that passed. In Springfield, there was a vote to repeal a city ordinance of the same general nature. But we remain optimistic that Senator Keaveny's bill can be passed into law this year. There has been Republican support for this for a number of years, quite simply because there's growing recognition and growing consensus that being able to be fired because you're gay is just wrong.
Jen's clearly wrong. Is this a problem in the state? I may be wrong. Is this happening? Do people get fired for being gay?
Yeah, I think they do, and that is it's somewhat disturbing that the city council steps up in Springfield, does the right thing. We start to look like a state, like you say, that we're looking out for all Missourians, and we're putting some of this partisan stuff and this sort of petty stuff behind us, and then you have church groups come in, and it turns into a religious battle. And I'm not sure that that's great for our state. I think it's embarrassing. I think it makes us look like, we're in the middle of this culture war when Rome is burning. And, this is an issue that I do believe that the United States, I think Missourians, have come to a consensus that we don't need to do this. This doesn't help business. It doesn't help growth. It doesn't help our citizens. So we need to put this battle behind us and move to things that affect people day to day.
You, Mr. Spence, and the Republicans, normally these are issues that you don't like to talk about. But people do.
It is what it is. I think, first of all, I think I've learned a lot from my kids. You got to pick what battles you want to pick. This is not a battle I would choose to pick right now. I think I've talked to several people in Springfield, though, and I think maybe the press is amplifying some of the tension that wasn't there. And they had a very civil discussion. It was a very adult discussion, and most of the people felt like it wasn't that the council was wrong to do this. They thought it was a flawed. It wasn't the council's place, it was a statewide issue. And that was basically, they felt the unintended consequences of that it needed to be pushed to the state versus in Springfield.
Let me answer that. I want to go back and I want to thank Sean. Sean, you have actually, I think, done an incredibly good job over the years of helping define issues, progressive issues in the debate, because I think we need someone as a voice, and I think you've done a really good job. But I think the press has gotten to where instead of really helping debate, they are not only influencing it, but I think they are actually creating an atmosphere where we can't have civil debate. And I'll take you back. A couple of years ago in 2003, we passed the Religious Restoration Freedom Act. That was signed by Governor Bob Holden. You know who his chief of staff was? Jane Dueker. Right. And that was because Jane Dueker and the governor, along with a narrow majority in the Senate, 31-0, passed. The House overwhelmingly passed 136-10, a Religious Freedom Act like 19 other states. And there was a good, discourse of debate of where we wanted to go. There were every major religious group weighed in for it. They wanted those protections because this country was founded on religious freedom. People have been coming here for centuries to enjoy their religious freedom. I think what disturbs me is that there is the religious freedom issues, and then there is the non-discrimination issues on gays. And candidly, I think the two of them are separate issues, and the press is getting them intermixed in a debate where I just think that the idea of requiring a Jewish-run business to produce a swastika cake for Nazis is not where we think this country needs to go. On the other hand, we need non-discrimination policies against the gay and lesbian, part of society.
So blanket policies against discrimination?
Yeah, but
Yes,
yeah.
it should be that simple. Yeah, and when you open up your business, I mean, I hear that example a lot. And I sort of understand where you're coming from, David, but when you open up your business to the public, there are certain standards by which you have to live. You have to put a ramp so that disabled people can get in there. You can't deny services because someone's a woman or an African American. This is no different. And so, you know, it's one thing to say the government cannot infringe on people's religion, and that's why we supported that bill.
Yeah, but there's
But
right
we
and
didn't
wrong.
regulate, you know, private party versus private party, and that's where Indiana fell, you know, where they turned this debate on its head and took it from religious freedom. They turned it from a shield into a sword,
But you can't-
and it should never be a sword.
You can't compare the idea that someone could have a conscientious objection to putting a wheelchair ramp in because you are facilitating someone that's handicapped versus being forced against your will, that your business to do something that you have a religious objection to. I think they're two very
But
different
you can't
things.
decide what a religious objection, because at some
we
point in
do.
our
For
history,
example-
people thought it was their religion to discriminate against African Americans.
And also in our
and that
history,
doesn't
we
look
have
good.
people who don't serve in the military and active, shooting guns and things because they're conscientious objectors, and we respect that. It was President Clinton who signed in the Religious Restoration Freedom Act nationally. So,
But it
I'm
didn't
just-
talk about private parties discriminating
Do you
against
think
private
this gets
parties.
over when they finally come to some resolution on marriage? I mean, how bizarre is it in 2015?
I mean, the Supreme
we look to
Court's
the
gonna weigh
government to
in.
be involved in who's married.
Right.
Who's not.
The Supreme Courts are going to weigh in, and I think this issue is going away. And, you know, I would like to see Missouri
But
be
marriage
on the
isn't
front
going to
of
be the
it.
end of it, because right now in Missouri law, you can announce your engagement on a Friday on Facebook, and you can be fired on Monday because you don't have employment protections because
One
of the
issue
way
though
God
that's
made
not
you.
going away here is 2016. I heard you say you're not running.
I am not running.
We had Eric Greitens this week, inch closer. John Bruner seems to make every intention. He's running for governor. In our last little bit here, Sean Nicholson, who do you want to see win that primary? Or you just want it to be long and big?
I think in a long and painful primary sounds wonderful. I think it sounds glorious.
Jane Dueker, who's the hardest person for Chris Koster to run against?
In my personal opinion, Eric Greitens.
Dave Spence, you've won this. You've won this primary before. Who's the best candidate in the day?
Yeah, and I really finished the deal, didn't I? No, just, it's going to be, here's the deal. I think Eric is a very accomplished, very smart, very bright person. I give him total credit for what he's achieved. My opinion is I think he's underestimating the task. There's very few people that could tell him that advice. I offered that to him. He's a young guy. There's plenty of time. I think if he wants to start in his career, the next part of his career, going for the governor is a tough, tough deal. 1,200 miles, 88,000, or 1,200 events, 88,000 miles. You are eating more rubber chicken than you can ever do in your life. He just wrote a book. I mean, you know, he's a new father. My suggestion to him was to enjoy that.
Sounds like it's going to be a fun primary.
Well, and also just see if he likes it. You get into it, and it's tough. It is really tough.
I know that you could do a lot in 20 seconds, David Barklage. I know you have a candidate in this. Who's the best and why?
I think it's not about who can beat Chris Koster. I think it's about who can lead Missouri. And I think that there's a lot of good Republican candidates, Mike Parson, Eric Greitens, everybody. I
Interesting
think John Bruner is the strongest one.
I agree.
Lastly, we want to thank everybody. This is the prestigious David Barklage Cup right
Which
here.
I had to, give up
We are
my
very
return.
fortunate to have one of the fathers of this concept back when it was the Tiger Blood tournament, Sean Nicholson here. Jane Dueker, the former champion, the namesake David Barklage, and Dave Spence, who stepped up this year. Every time you hashtag Barklage Cup, $1 goes to the Epilepsy Foundation.
I had no idea what I was getting into. So
And look at all the good you've
We're gonna
done.
make sure.
And we will see you again next week on This Week in Missouri Politics.